So I wanted to ask you,
yes,
you explained this resistance very well. So how, can you tell us a little bit about how we move into relaxing and releasing that? How do we go about that kind of thing?
yeah. If you were talking in relation to, let's say, a practice of Sutra, then you know the Buddha discussed a lot about suffering, its cause, tension, grasping. And the way you work with that from a Sutra perspective is through a kind of focused relaxation on the very point where tension is arising. Now, sometimes we feel tension in the body very, in a very precise way, like a kind of sensation. And there's nothing particularly wrong with sensation, feelings, emotions, etc. But when they get mixed with thoughts, then they start to become, they kind of become a source of paralysis. They block us, you see. And by placing focused attention or relaxation upon the very place, it has to be pinpointed, one's attention, at the place where that tension is arising, we discover a kind of release. If you have experience in meditation or something like that, and you try that a bit, you discover that it really does work. And we discover a kind of opening. You can say something like emptiness. When you get into Vajrayana Buddhism, it's a little bit different, because the sutric point of view is that this tension or grasping, emotional, etc., it's useless. It's something that we should have to abandon. But in the Tantric Buddhism, they try to establish a kind of direct relationship between the manifestation of resistance and its wisdom quality. So that only becomes more evident if one actually engages in the various practices that the Vajrayana suggests. Then we can see how those things are related. But when you come to Dzogchen, the position changes, because you see, in the Vajrayana, they make a big deal out of pure and impure, pure vision and impure vision. But in Dzogchen, that distinction isn't so important. They don't really care whether there's pure vision or impure vision. What they're interested, what's really being suggested there or advised, is that we see the intimate connection between whatever vision we have, whatever thought that arises, and its primordial source. And as long as we understand that connection, and not just like a theoretical posturing of some sort, but we've actually done practice and more evident to us as a genuine kind of experience, then it becomes possible to relax in whatever it is that's arising, because we have knowledge of its ultimate primordial condition, regardless whether it's a good feeling or a bad feeling, and in this sense, whatever emotion it is that arises and creates some kind of resistance, it's automatically and spontaneously released with that knowledge. So just as, an example is given sometimes, let's say, of waves in an ocean. it doesn't really matter to the ocean whether there's a big wave or a small wave or a beautiful wave or a very choppy wave. It all resolves itself in the same place. So it's the same thing, more or less, as what you've mentioned there, as this bundle of sticks tied up together. And if one has this kind of knowledge, then those sticks just naturally fall down in place and everything is resolved. We don't need to apply any particular antidotes. We don't need to do some kind form of transformational process, something like that. So this is all very important when one approaches this subject of resistance from this particular level. And then, not only is it released, and we recognize that primordial source, but we come to understand that the emptiness that was indicated in Sutric Buddhism is not really the final thing that's being suggested in Dzogchen. We understand that everything has a particular kind of potentiality, a particular kind of thrust, a kind of self-thrust, and that we are able to, through training, we're able to relax with the self-potentiality of all of our vision and all of our thoughts. And everything becomes somehow useful. Nothing is rejected.
Can you repeat that?
So these are just broad outlines. Yeah.
Can you repeat that last point about self-thrust? And you broke up for just a minute. Can you just repeat that last point you made to bring it home?
We recognize in Sutric Buddhism, everything is kind of resolved in emptiness, you see. But in Dzogchen, the idea is a little bit different. All of our vision and all of our thoughts have a particular kind of potency, a self-potency. It's their own, what I also use the word, its own kind of like, its own thrust. And that thrust resolves itself. Our vision and our thoughts resolve themselves without having to abandon anything. They have their own particular kind of, let's say, power, their own potency. And so we don't need to renounce anything, we don't need to transform anything, but it's absolutely imperative that we recognize the connection between whatever we're experiencing and its ultimate nature. And for that, we need practice. Because in general, we're very addicted to experiencing things with attachment and rejection and resistance. And as long as we are conditioned with that kind of the tools of that particular disease, then we won't find any kind of release.